So, if you've decided the DJI Flip is for you and picked one up, in this video I'm going to be showing you the top 15 settings you need to change. Starting with the smartphone app with settings for the tracking, camera and more, and then we will also move over to the controller, which includes additional settings worth adjusting. Along the way, I will also share a few tips and tricks to help you get the most out of your Flip. Let's jump right in. Alright, and let's start by taking a look at a few settings you will want to change if you're flying the Flip with your smartphone. If you haven't already connected your phone to the drone, you can do this by downloading and installing the DJI Fly app to your phone, and then with the app open and the drone turned on, you will see this blue connect icon appear on the home screen, and once you press this, after a few seconds, the connection will be complete. Now in here, you can see you get access to a range of information about the drone itself, and you can also control it. So across the top, for example, you can see things like how much power is left and the battery inserted into the drone. Below this, you can also see the camera preview, so you can see exactly what you're capturing. And then below that, if you press this big white button, you can change between the individual quickshot modes. And once you've selected one, you can take the drone off and have it perform the maneuver by pressing this green start button. Now we want to access the settings menu, which you can do by tapping the settings icon on the bottom right of the app screen. Now in here you can see there's quite a lot of things we can change, with the first 6 options allowing us to customize each individual quickshot mode. And the first one I highly recommend you change, depending on the location you're flying, is the follow mode, so let's tap into that. Now in here you can see we can adjust the distance and height the drone will fly at as it's tracking you. Now it's very important to remember the Flip comes with forward-facing obstacle avoidance, and despite the fact you will get a message saying this turns off once the drone starts tracking you, it will still stop if it detects an obstacle. So let's say for example you're flying in a tighter, more confined space, maybe indoors or in a forest for example with overhead branches. The last thing you would want to do is set the follow distance to far and the height to high, as this could cause the drone to rise up into the path of them obstacles, such as a branch, and if the drone does detect that obstacle, it will brake and hover in place and stop tracking you. So to get a nice, smooth, continuous track in those environments, I recommend setting the height to flat and the distance to medium so the drone stays lower and closer to you to avoid it getting tangled in those obstacles. If, on the other hand, you're flying in a wide open outdoor area, but it maybe has lower down obstacles such as bushes or in this example, this bridge, you wouldn't want to set the follow height to lower flat, as again this could cause the drone to detect them obstacles and stop tracking you. But you can see you need to adjust these settings specific to the location you are flying. Now when you do start using the follow tracking mode with the DJI Flip, something you will realize very quickly is it will only track you from behind. Even if you take it off in front of yourself, once you start moving, the drone will automatically move around to that rear-facing position. So how do we get tracking shots from different orientations than just from behind? Well, to do that, you need to use something called direction track, but by default, this isn't enabled. So let's go back to the main settings menu, and the 6th quickshot mode you can customize is actually called custom. And that's because if you tap into it and tap the drop down at the top, you can set this to be one of 3 additional quickshot modes: Helix, Boomerang, and the one we want, Direction Track. Now once you have this set to Direction Track and you select the custom quickshot mode on the drone itself, whatever orientation you take the drone off from, it will stay in that position as it tracks you. So you could take it off from in front of yourself, for example, to have the drone fly along in front of you to capture that orientation while it's tracking you. Or you could take it off to your side to have it fly along next to you to get a side-facing tracking shot. Alright, so those are some of the quick shot settings I recommend changing first when using the DJI Flip. Let's now take a look at some of the video settings to make sure you're getting the highest quality possible from this drone. So let's tap into the video option from within the settings menu, and the first setting you will want to change is the resolution. You want to make sure this is set to 4K so that you're getting the highest quality footage possible. Now if you want to capture slow motion footage when using the smartphone app to fly the Flip, you can lower the resolution to 1080p, which gives you access to 60 FPS, which will allow you to slow the footage down by around 2 times. However, just be aware, this is not the highest quality or slowest slow motion footage you can capture with the DJI Flip. You see, if you change over to start flying with the controller, you get access to a dedicated slow motion mode, which allows you to capture 4K 100 FPS footage, and this allows you to slow it down by around 3 or 4 times. But to get access to that, you must be using the controller. And we will get on to all the additional features that you gain access to when flying with a controller later in this video. Now, the next setting I recommend you change from within this menu is the color profile. You see, the DJI Flip comes with 2 color modes. Normal, which will give you footage you can use straight from the drone and doesn't require any color grading, and 10-bit D-Log-M. Now, D-Log-M is a flatter color profile that better preserves the highlights and shadows, giving you much more flexibility when editing in post. Now, normally, I would advise most people just use the normal color profile for ease of use. However, in my testing with the DJI Flip, the difference in quality between the normal mode and color graded D-Log-M footage is quite substantial. Primarily because when you use the normal color profile, you will see this post-processed over-sharpened look being applied to the footage, and that just isn't present when using D-Log-M, leading to much more natural footage. So for that reason, that's the setting I would recommend. Now, when you use D-Log-M, you will need to color grade the footage, but if you don't know how, DJI has actually very handily provided a free conversion lot on their website, which I will put a link to in the description down below, and all you have to do is add that to your footage, make a few minor tweaks, and you are good to go. Okay, so now that we have adjusted our video settings, let's tap back to the main settings menu, and then let's tap into photo, as there's a few specific photo settings you will want to change to make sure you're getting the highest quality images possible from the DJI Flip. And the first and most important one is photo format, as the Flip allows you to capture either JPEG or RAW images. So using JPEG, you will get photos that you can use straight from your drone, and these will have smaller file sizes. However, compared to JPEG, if you use RAW, those images contain a much wider dynamic range and have more data in them, which gives you much more flexibility when editing your images in a photo editor. You'll have much more flexibility to do things like recover highlights and shadows, and therefore using the RAW format will result in you getting better looking images from this drone after you've edited them in your image editor. Now, I personally recommend you set the photo format to JPEG and RAW. That way, for every image you capture, you get the best of both worlds. You get a JPEG version, which is ready to go straight from the drone, should you need to upload it quickly to social media, for example, but then you also get a RAW file of the same image to edit in your photo editor. Now, the next setting beneath this is for our aspect ratio, and I highly recommend you set this to 4:3, as this allows you to capture an image with the full size of the camera sensor, and you can always crop a 16:9 out of the 4:3 image afterwards in your image editor. But capturing that initial image in 4:3 also gives you that additional verticality, so you can have more flexibility should you need to reframe your photo after the fact. Now, the last photo setting you want to change is the photo resolution. And if you're capturing images in daylight, I recommend you change this to the 48 megapixel option. And that's because you will get a higher quality image with a higher resolution and more detail. The only caveat to this is, if you are instead capturing images in lower light situations, such as sunrise, sunset, or nighttime, in my testing I have found using the 48 megapixel option, you will get more noise in your images. So to reduce some of that noise in lower light, I recommend dropping this down to 12 megapixels. But for all other situations where you have good lighting, 48 megapixels is the better option. Now, just quickly, if you're getting value from this video, please let me know by giving me the thumbs up and clicking that like button down below. And if you love all things drones, but also action cameras, gimbals and more, and want to learn about the best settings to get up and running quickly, along with tips and tricks to help you get more cinematic videos and better looking images with your gear, then please consider clicking that subscribe button down below. And when you're down there, be sure to check the notification bell so that you will be alerted when my new videos are released. It would be greatly appreciated. Alright, let's now move over to take a look at a few settings you will want to change if you switch to flying the Flip with a controller. And these apply regardless if you're using the DJI RC N3, that's the controller you attach your phone to, or the DJI RC2. And the first thing you will notice when you start using the controller is that the interface changes to look more like what we are used to seeing when flying other DJI drones compared to the simplified smartphone-only version of the app. And this allows us access to more advanced camera controls. But something that's super important to be aware of is the fact that the settings you have set on the smartphone app do not carry across to using the controller. So the first time you use the controller, you want to make sure to go in and double check settings we have already discussed, such as video settings like resolution and frame rate, or photo settings like the format, aspect ratio, and megapixel setting to make sure they are set exactly how you want. The last thing you want to happen is to get caught out by not realizing that when you changed over to flying the Flip with the controller instead of the smartphone app, that the settings were different. So maybe, for example, the resolution dropped down to 1080p until after you have come home and started playing back the footage, as that would be a disaster. So take a few seconds and double check the settings when you start flying with the controller. Now, one of the most unique design features of the DJI Flip is its large folding arms with the propeller guards attached. And when you start to unfold these arms, the drone will actually automatically turn on. And likewise, when you fold the drone back down, it will automatically turn off. Now, this can be very handy. However, it may not be for you. I know myself, for example, when I'm setting up for the day, I'll actually take my drone out, unfold it, but then I'll go back over to my camera bag and start taking out the rest of my gear. So having the drone automatically turn on and then just sit there using up battery is not ideal. Well, handily, if you do want to turn this feature off, you can do that by tapping the three white dots on the top right of the controller screen to bring up the settings menu, and then under the safety tab, you can scroll all the way down until you see the power and battery options. And here you can specifically turn off the auto power on when you unfold it and the auto power off when you fold it back down. So for me, I've turned off the auto power on feature when I unfold the drone. I like to just do that manually, but I have kept on the feature that turns it back off when I fold it back down, just in case I forget to turn it off when I'm done for the day when I put it into my camera bag. Now, sticking with the safety settings menu, if you scroll up a little bit, you will see an option called Auto Return to Home Altitude. And this is arguably the most important setting you will want to adjust when flying your drone. You see, this changes the height at which the drone will rise up to when return to home engages before it automatically flies back to its home point. And it's very important that you set this altitude to be higher than any of the tallest obstacles in your area, such as trees, for example. What you don't want to happen is for this altitude to be lower than any of them obstacles, because that means that when return to home engages, if the drone encounters any of them obstacles along its flight path, because of its forward-facing obstacle avoidance, it will simply just brake and hover in place, and it won't automatically return back to you. So you must make sure this is set at least 10 or 20 meters above the tallest obstacle in your area, so the drone will safely fly above them as it returns back to you and safely return automatically. Now, another safety setting that's worth knowing about is called Signal Lost Action. And you can find this setting by scrolling all the way down to the bottom of the safety settings menu and then tapping into advanced safety settings. Now, next to Signal Lost, you can see we have three options, and these change what the drone will do when you lose signal to it. Now, by default, this is set to return to home, and for most environments, this will be ideal, allowing the drone to automatically fly back to its home point if you lose signal to it. But there are a few situations where you would want to change this. Let's say you're again flying indoors or in a forest, for example, with them overhead branches and trees. If you lost signal to your drone, which is more likely to happen in those environments because you have more obstacles to create interference, the last thing you would want to happen is for return to home to engage and the drone to start rising up into the air, potentially colliding with them overhanging obstacles. In those environments, it would be much safer to either set this to descend, so that if you lose signal to the drone, it will simply lower and land in position, or hover, so if you lose signal to the drone, it will simply hover in place where you can walk closer to it and regain connection. So again, it's worth changing this setting in certain environments. Now, the DJI Flip comes with the incredibly useful cruise control feature, which if you don't know, works very much like the cruise control function of your car, allowing you to start a movement with the joysticks on the controller, enable cruise control, and then you can take your fingers off the joysticks and the drone will continue to do that move automatically. But out of the box by default, this feature is not enabled. So if you want to use the cruise control function, go back to the settings menu and this time go to the control subheading. and then scroll all the way down until you see the button customization option. Now in here, you can customize what happens when you press either of the function buttons on the back of the DJI RC2 controller or the single function button on the front of the DJI RC-N3 controller. So you want to select one of these function buttons, and then under the control tab, you want to set this to cruise control. And now all you have to do to use the cruise control function is start to do a movement with the joysticks on your controller, and once you're happy, lock that movement in by pressing the function button you have just assigned to cruise control, and now you can take your fingers off the joysticks and the drone will continue to do that move. And if you want to stop cruise control at any time, you simply just have to press this X located on the screen here. Now when you start flying the Flip with a controller, one of the main things you gain access to that's not available on the smartphone only version of the app is manual video controls. So you can see right now we are in auto mode, where the drone automatically controls the ISO and shutter speed to get an image it thinks looks properly exposed. But if we tap that auto icon on the bottom right of the controller screen, we change into Pro mode, where we can now manually control the ISO and shutter speed. Switching back to auto mode, however, something I will suggest if you are going to use this mode is that before you hit record to start capturing footage, you do something called locking the exposure. You see, when you use automatic exposure mode and are flying the drone around, you will often find quite large exposure shifts in your footage. And this is especially true if moving from a light area to a dark area or from a dark area to a light area. And these large exposure shifts can look very jarring to your viewer. So how do we prevent this from happening? Well, it's actually really straightforward. All you have to do before you hit record is simply press and hold on the controller screen until you see auto exposure locked appear, and you will also see a small yellow padlock symbol. And what this now means is the ISO and shutter speed values the drone has automatically chosen for this scene are now locked, so it will not change them as you fly around, so you won't get them jarring exposure shifts. Now, if you decide to instead use the normal color profile when capturing footage with your DJI Flip, you will probably find the videos look very sharp. They will have that digital over-sharpened look to them we have come to expect with recent DJI drones. But luckily, we can dial some of that back. So to do this, within the settings menu, go across to the camera tab and then scroll down until you see the style option. Now next to this, you will see a small down-facing arrow, and if you tap this, you will see two new options appear. And using these, you can dial in how much sharpness or noise reduction you want applied to your footage, and I highly recommend you set the sharpness setting to -1 to remove some of that digital over-sharpened look from your footage. Now, one of the things that shocked me when I first started flying the DJI Flip was just how fast it moved around in Cine mode. Cine mode is supposed to be what you use when you want them nice, slow, smooth cinematic clips, but that's pretty much impossible using the Cine mode with the DJI Flip because it just moves around so fast. It's more like a normal mode than a Cine mode, but luckily this can be fixed by changing some of the gain and expo settings. Now, to access these, you want to go to the control tab and tap into the gain and expo tuning option. Now in here, we can adjust how the drone reacts in the air to the inputs we make on the joysticks on the controller. And you can do this for each of the flight modes, but we are only interested in Cine mode, so you want to make sure across the top Cine is selected. Now there's two options in here I recommend you slow down. The first is the max horizontal speed, and I've lowered this to 1.5 meters per second, which I find works much better for what is supposed to be a Cine mode. Scrolling down, and the second setting I recommend you slow down is the max angular velocity. This is the speed at which the drone will rotate, and I've lowered this to its slowest setting of 20 degrees a second. And using these two slower settings, I find the Cine mode reacts much more as you would expect, allowing you to get slower, more cinematic shots in that flight mode. So there you have it, the top 15 settings I recommend changing first if you have just picked up your brand new DJI Flip. And hopefully these settings help you have more fun using it, get better looking footage, and have safer flights. Now before you go, if you've liked this video and learned something new, please let me know by giving me the thumbs up and clicking that like button down below. And if you love all things drones, but also action cameras, gimbals and more, and want to know how to get better images and more cinematic videos with your gear, then I recommend you check out my channel where I have a ton of other content to help you level up your game. If you don't want to miss any of my upcoming videos, then I recommend you click that subscribe button down below, and when you're down there, be sure to check the notification bell so that you will be alerted when my new videos are released. It would be greatly appreciated. And if you want to stick around and watch a few more now, here's a few I personally recommend. I'll not keep you back any further. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you over there.